I've felt it too, the wind and the waves beating down on you. I've felt the pressing weight caught between a rock and a hard place. I've stared out at a sea that hadn't parted and felt like I was finished before I ever started. Like Peter, once he was out of the boat, I've taken my eyes off my Savior and lost all hope. I've wandered and I've wondered, will this ever end? Exhausted and weary, begging my knees not to bend. Yet the words of David wash over me. I have a beautiful inheritance indeed. And at this moment, a war has begun. Do I trust more my feelings or what he has done? When Joshua went into battle, I imagine his faith was hard to rattle. After all, he knew what he'd seen. He had walked between water on both sides and dry ground beneath. He gathered bread from the ground, and rang in his ears did the magnificent sound as the walls of Jericho fell with their shouts, in spite of all of their doubts. He mourned and dealt boldly with sin, rallied his people once again, and then, even bolder than that pile of rocks, he raised his voice and told the sun to stop. And it did. How could he do that? Joshua knew the thing that we forget, that it's worth it to press on to what we can't see yet. He who promised is faithful, and those promises are plentiful. Why settle in Egypt for striving fame or money when there is land flowing with milk and honey? The promise is that we can enter his rest, free and new, with our sin as far as east from west. Joshua knew he was no longer a slave and stepped into the authority that the Father gave. It doesn't really matter what you feel, because, believer, the Spirit is your seal. Joshua moved in the face of fear because he knew that he who is greater is always near. The path may be hard, but the story is good. Obey with weak knees and shaking hands because you've understood. He will deliver, sustain, and carry you, justify, sanctify, make you like Jesus too. We stand in the promise because he's never failed. Not one idea of his has ever been derailed. I stand in the promise because what he said to a girl in a garden was fulfilled on a hill I could never have climbed. He comes through every time. And though our God may make us wait, he has never been late. There are pages of fulfillment in the word that he gave, stories that help us to trust and be brave. In the room where you're sitting and perhaps still wrestling, there are stories of victory and redemption worth listening. But there are some still waiting, still hurting, it's true. So take heart in the fact that there are brothers standing with you, waiting and hoping, pushing you on, putting your name and your need before the throne over and over until breakthrough comes, and we can dance with you on victory's drums. Stand firm, stand strong on every word he said, because the best is yet to come, my friend. The promise of eternity in his presence still hangs as a sweet banner in the distance. As he moves and prepares for his bride to come home, he is making a place for you on streets of gold. Joshua stood in the promised land, and we stand in the promise of nail-scarred hands until the day the promise is complete, and we worship forever before the mercy seat. Like the saints before us, just getting started in those pages, stand on the promises of the Rock of Ages.